Hey y'all, so today I'm here in my new apartment with my big bookshelves to bring you my July wrap-up and August TBR. And right off the bat, don't get attached to this arrangement of my books because literally right after I film this video, I'm going to be rearranging them because although this looks all nice and good, down there really doesn't, and I'm gonna try to mix things up and figure out how to fix that. So in the month of July, I managed to complete 5 books, 2 of which were collections of short stories slash novellas, and I actually read 4 of those books within the hashtag Cramathon that happened a few weeks ago, so I will leave a link down in the description to my video where I gave updates on the Cramathon and eventually did my wrap-up. However, I purposely did not go into my opinions on those books in that video because I wanted to talk about them here, so let's just jump into the wrap-up. So the first book that I completed in the month of July was The Bane Chronicles by Cassandra Clare, Sarah Rees Brennan, and Maureen Johnson. This was my first read for the Cramathon, and I actually was already 300 pages into it before this month. I read the first 6 novellas back in like November and December of last year and then put it down because I really wasn't feeling it, but I decided to complete it for the Cramathon. That being said though, the 4 novellas from this that I did read during the Cramathon were some of my favorite novellas in the entire book, so I did really enjoy the ones that I read this month. However, like I've said about this in the past, some of the early novellas in this weren't that exciting, especially the first one. This book got off on a really bad start because the first novella in this bind-up is my least favorite. It's basically a series of short snippets of Magnus Bane's life within an already short 50-page novella. It's just not that great. Even though I absolutely love Magnus Bane, the best novellas within this bind-up were the ones where we did get to see characters from Cassandra Clare's other Shadowhunter books, and we do get to see both characters from The Infernal Devices and from The Mortal Instruments, which I really enjoyed. So my personal favorites in here were The Midnight Heir, What to Buy the Shadowhunter Who Has Everything and Who You're Not Officially Dating Anyway, and The Course of True Love. And I would also kind of throw in there The Last Stand of the New York Institute, although the other 3 are definitely above that one. Even though in my wrap-up I decided to give it 8.5 stars out of 10, I've decided that 8 out of 10 is a more accurate rating because going into the Cramathon, I had kind of like a 7-star rating in mind because I thought that it was good but just kind of not special. Like I enjoyed it, but there was nothing really that great about it. But the other novellas that I read during the Cramathon really boosted my opinion of this, so I did decide to go with 8 stars out of 10. The second book that I completed during the month of July was The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson, which is book 3 in the Mistborn trilogy. And I don't know what to say about this. Like, y'all already know that I think that this trilogy is amazing. It's so incredibly written, the plot is amazing, the characters are amazing, the magic system is amazing. It's just, I have nothing bad to say about this trilogy. It's so great, and if you are a fan of fantasy, I would highly recommend it. 10 out of 10 stars for The Hero of Ages. I really don't know what else to say about it. It's just so good. This trilogy is amazing. I do have trouble ranking the books within the trilogy as far as my favorites. I would still say that The Final Empire is my favorite in the trilogy, but books 2 and 3 are still outstanding. I've given them all 10 out of 10 stars. It's just an amazing trilogy. The next book that I completed in the month of July was The Future Collection by Beth Revis, which is another collection of short stories. Like with many short story collections, and like with the Bane Chronicles, there were definitely some novellas in here that I really enjoyed and some that I thought were just mediocre. In the end, I ended up giving this 7.5 stars out of 10. I'm not going to go into star ratings for each of the individual novellas. I tried to think about it and decide on a rating for each one, but I really couldn't come up with a distinct rating, so I'm just gonna tell you which novellas I enjoyed and which ones I didn't. So the first novella, which was Doctor-Patient Confidentiality, was definitely my least favorite novella in the bind-up. I thought that the little twist that was in there was pretty obvious, and I didn't really feel connected to the story at all. I mean, granted, it was only like 15 pages if I'd read it in print, but still. It was my least favorite. The second novella within the bind-up is The Most Precious Memory, and that one was one of my favorites in the bind-up, if not my absolute favorite. I thought that the world was really intriguing, and I definitely would want to see more, like, a full novel from this world, so Beth Revis, get on that. The next short story is The Girl and the Machine, and I didn't really have significant feelings one way or the other about this one. I definitely didn't think it was a bad novella, but I figured out the little twist at the end before it happened, and I just thought it was decent but not outstanding. The fourth short story in the bind-up is called Lag, and I haven't seen any confirmation from Beth Revis about this, but this seems to take place within the same world as her book The Body Electric, because it does have some similar technology going on within it. That being said, I think that Lag is a really great short story. However, I would definitely say make sure you read it after you read The Body Electric, because The Body Electric is a really great novel by Beth Revis, and this novella will spoil The Body Electric for you. The fifth short story in the bind-up is called The Turing Test, and I actually would probably say that if The Most Precious Memory isn't my favorite, then this one is, because the twist actually surprised me at the end of this one, and I thought that this was a really well-written short story, and I really enjoyed it. I would say that if you're interested in checking out Beth Revis as a writer, then I would definitely recommend to check out The Most Precious Memory and The Turing Test if you just want like a short snippet of her writing style and her world building, because both are really well written and I think give a pretty good idea of Beth Revis as a writer. And finally, the last short story / novella in the bind-up is called As They Slip Away, and this actually takes place within the world of her Across the Universe trilogy. Now, although Goodreads does have this marked as a prequel to the Across the Universe trilogy, I definitely would not recommend reading it before the trilogy. The main events of the novella do take place before the trilogy happens. However, there is a little bit of overlap, and while it doesn't spoil anything big, I feel like you should just read Across the Universe and then read this novella, just so that there's no spoiling of anything that happens at all. And plus, I don't think that some stuff would make sense if you didn't have the context of Across the Universe. So read Across the Universe, then read As They Slip Away. As for the actual quality of the novella, it was obviously well written. I love Beth Revis's writing, but I wasn't sure how necessary it really was to the Across the Universe trilogy. I mean, it was an interesting backstory on some of the side characters, but it wasn't really any of the side characters that I really cared about. So it was just kind of not that important to me. But if you do want to read it, go for it. It's a well-written, well-structured novella. The next book that I finished in the month of July, which was also my last Cramathon read, was Therithmatist by Brandon Sanderson, which is the first book in its series. I'm not sure if it's called the Therithmatist series, but it's the first book in its series. And if I were to choose a book that I was most impressed with this month, I would have to go with Therithmatist. I didn't give it as high of a rating as I gave Hero of Ages. I gave it 9 out of 10 stars, but I wasn't expecting to enjoy it as much as I did. Like, this is the first time in a very long time that I have gotten this invested in a world and a magic system and a set of characters in such a short book. So The Therithmatist takes place in kind of like an alternate version of our world, where instead of being the United States, it's kind of like the United Islands of America, because each state is its own separate island and has a slightly different name than the one that they have in our world. The main character of this book is a boy named Joel who is obsessed with becoming a rhythmatist. And in this world, rhythmatists are people who are able to kind of make chalk drawings on the ground that they use to fight against people and against like chalk monsters. It's a very detailed form of magic that I'm not going to really go into detail in here, but it's a really interesting chalk-based system of magic. And Joel is obsessed with everything that has to do with being a rhythmatist. Like, he studies like the theory behind it and like all the different forms of fighting that are used. But Joel will never be able to become a rhythmatist because he was not blessed with the power when he went through the ceremony when he was, I think, 8. So he can never become a rhythmatist. But Joel goes to a school that is kind of a mix of rhythmatist students and normal students, and some of the rhythmatist students start going missing. And that's kind of the starting point for this book, and I was really impressed by it. Like I said, I don't know the last time that I got this invested in characters and a magic system and a world within this short of a book, and I just can't wait for the next one, which won't be out until, like, I don't know, 2017 or something. Brandon Sanderson, get the next book out. I did get kind of a Chalk Zone vibe before reading this, but I can tell you it's nothing alike. The only similarity is that chalk is involved. So I ended up giving this 9 out of 10 stars. The reason it didn't get any higher is just because even though I really enjoyed it, there wasn't anything that particularly surprised me or shocked me. I just thought that it was a really great first installment in a series, and I cannot wait to see what happens next. And finally, the last book that I read in the month of July was Armada by Ernest Cline, which was one of my most anticipated releases of the year. So Armada is about a kid named Zach who loves this online game called Armada. He's 6th in the world, he spends all his time playing it, he's really good at it. And then one day, he looks out his window at school and he sees one of the spaceships from his Armada game, and he thinks that he's seeing things, and he's really confused. And then Zach discovers that the game is real, and that he and a ton of other gamers around the world are needed to help save Earth from an alien invasion. Like I said, this was one of my most anticipated releases of the year because I loved Ready Player One by Ernest Cline, but I was kind of let down a little bit by it. Like, this is not a bad book at all. It was an enjoyable read, it was fast-paced, it was exciting, but there wasn't anything necessarily impressive about it. I wasn't incredibly invested in the characters or in the plot, and I felt like it got bogged down a little bit from a lot of like technical jargon with the flight simulator and with the planes, and I don't know, I wasn't impressed by it like I was with Ready Player One. In the end, I gave it 8 out of 10 stars. I think I hyped it up a little bit too much in my mind, and I just wasn't as impressed with it as I thought I would be. So now moving on to my August TBR. Now, I did post a booktubeathon TBR a couple days ago, which I will link down in the description. So I'm not gonna go into too much detail about my August TBR, mostly because I don't know what I'm going to be reading after the booktubeathon. And I don't know what books I'm going to be in the mood for after the booktubeathon, or even if I will want to do much reading after the booktubeathon, because that's gonna be an insane week. So I'm not really going to hold myself to any sort of TBR. The only thing I'm going to do in terms of a TBR is to do my TBR jar challenge. I got the idea for this TBR jar challenge from Kat from Therithmatist. I'll leave a link down to the video where she kind of discussed and announced this TBR jar challenge. And basically every piece of paper in here has a challenge on it. Pull a challenge every month and I have to complete that challenge. So let's see what challenge I have to do this month. Okay, so this is the challenge I have to complete. This is an interesting one that I forgot was in here. It's to read a book from my 30 books before 30 list. So back in December, Jamie from Good Books posted a video where she listed the 30 books that she wanted to read before she was 30. I'll leave a link down in the description to that video. But basically I thought that that was a really interesting idea, and I did a blog post on it because at the time I was not vlogging yet. And I totally forgot that I had a challenge in here that was relating to my 30 books before 30 challenge, so I never made a video about it. Maybe I should now that I've talked about it, but let me go look at the list so that I know what books are actually on it. So I looked at my 30 books before 30 list, and none of them really jumped out to me except for Throne of Glass, and I did give myself the rule that I was not allowed to buy any books to fulfill the challenges, so that marks that off the list as much as I might want to read it. So I'm not sure what I'm gonna do to complete this challenge yet. I will do it, I'll choose a book, but at this very point in time, I don't know what I'm gonna be in the mood for. I'll figure it out sometime this month. So even though this is my July wrap up and my August TBR, I'm not really telling you any of the books that I'm gonna be reading in August. Sorry. So yeah, if you do want to check out my booktubeathon TBR, the link will be down in the description. However, that's all that I had for my July wrap-up and my August TBR. Let me know down in the comments what book you most enjoyed reading in July and what book you're most excited to read in August. As always, I will leave links down in the description to my blog, Twitter, and Goodreads. Please add me as a friend on Goodreads. I would love to be friends with all of you. Like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!